Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and boy oh boy, every time I make these videos, everyone's like, how can you say the bubble keeps crashing, Muta? What do you have to offer? What are you talking about? Now, every time I make these videos, there's been a pretty significant, new development every single time, and generally, I just kind of catch it all into one little term here. Now, of course, before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, I've received, some communication from AI bros who have said, Muta, how can you make a negative video and still use AI technology? Aren't you a bad man? Aren't you Hippocrates? Now, to give you an idea, I use artificial intelligence when I make these videos in terms of showing you how the technology works. Right now, you can see that the AI that I'm using is loaded onto my own local system. Yes, I do download local models, freely downloadable by you, me, and anybody else. And there are certain different types of models, like there are small ones that you can run on your own graphics card right now. There are some models that I can run on enthusiast grade graphics cards. And then there are some that unless you have like a $5,000 fucking Spark sitting on your desk, you can run crazy shit on that. So yes, guys and gals, local stuff, self-hosted stuff is something that I'm totally 100% okay with. Look, if we have to live in a world where LLMs are going to hallucinate their ways anyways, instead of going to chatgpt.com, any of these services and asking them to do your shit while they harvest your information and burn God knows how much compute, you should try to self-host as much as you can. Even if you're somebody that says, but Muta, I don't even have a computer that I can run this stuff on. Even if you have a smartphone, surprisingly, you can actually run local AI models on cell phones these days too. It's actually one of these markets that I think is the most exciting tech-wise, right? The ability to self-host the shit that these people are selling to you for God knows how much. The prices just keep going up these days. So I feel like the only way to make this bubble kind of crash or contribute to it is when you start to take away the usage and the revenue from these big guys, then everything comes down, which is actually where this video is kind of headed to. Now, one thing that brought a smile to my face, partially for this video, was reading the words that AI is just way too fucking expensive. And the reality of it is, yes, it is. Every time you go to an AI model and you ask it to generate words, each of those tokens costs a certain amount of money to generate, right? That's just how it works. So for instance, since I'm running my own local AI slop, I can actually walk you through this entire project right here. Let me make a directory and call it platforming game. So inside platforming game, I'm gonna run something called Claude, which is actually connected to my local model. So for instance, right over here, you can see that the local model is like, huh? You asked? So I'm gonna be like, hell yeah, bitch. Here you go, Claude. Now this is not connected to their big servers in the cloud. I'm gonna tell it, make me a little platforming game. Now you might have asked yourself the question, Muta, what happens when the AI starts prompting itself? Well, it kind of can. You can just give it a goal. So for instance, I'm gonna give it an actual goal over here. I'm gonna say, here's your goal. Make a platforming game similar to Super Mario. To Super Mario Bros. Make it in a single HTML file and give it colorful visuals. Use the Lassier XNG tool, which is my local search engine, to look online for updated code, for updated and best coding practices as you proceed. So of course, ladies and gentlemen, hitting the old enter button over here, I gave this AI a command, and as you can see, it's spinning up the gears on my computer, getting shit moving. Now, as we let this AI slop its way through, let's go talk about how these prices are racking up, because that will permeate into what happens down the road. So a few things that I've been reading on places like Reddit, for instance, where on the r/experience developers, these people have basically been saying, I'm a manager at a company with 5,000 to 6,000 employees, and basically over the last couple of months, their AI spending has actually exploded. This was posted 5 days ago. So to give you an idea, the last month bill at this person's company apparently came up to around $1 million, okay? So imagine, you buy this nice shiny new tool, and AI, when you purchase it, when you need it to do anything that's tangible and not just slop out random crap, it costs you a pay-per-use situation. It's a pay-per-use style situation where I kind of want you to think of it like buying gas, right? Anytime you need to use your car, you probably need to buy some fucking gas. And depending on what kind of car you have, you may need to buy the more expensive versions of gas. So that's kind of how it works, right? Every token that you're basically purchasing here, you're doing it on a per-use bill, right? Meaning that the more you use the AI slop, the more it's going to cost you, obviously. So as this is basically cooking, if this was connected to, Claude, it would actually be charging me per token. So how much is the cost going to be? Well, we'll find out as we get towards the end what the usage will look like. But for these guys, they're spending close to about $1 million fucking dollars every month, and it's only getting more expensive. Now, of course, you don't have to take some random Reddit post for your answers right over here, too. You might know the company Uber, right? Uber uses artificial intelligence. Uber ended up actually having to issue caps on all of the AI that they would use inside their company because people were reaching its max. So for instance, Uber puts a $1,500 cap per actual employee and the tools they use to write code, whether that be Claude Code or Cursor. And the reality of it is that I've talked to pretty much every developer friend that I know. Everyone is using artificial intelligence. Long are the days of just sitting in front of a computer and writing every line of code yourself. That is too slow. Even if you're not somebody that wants to contribute to the massive AI world around you, there's no shame in pulling up a local model like I have and kind of using it to autocomplete or maybe scaffold a few things. Obviously, not write an entire game. This is just an extreme example that I'm showing. But obviously, not using any form of artificial intelligence is kind of shooting yourself in the fucking foot in some capacity. So how much money did they spend, for instance? Well, to give you an idea, they had a budget for 1 year for people to use AI slop at their company. And it turns out in a matter of 4 fucking months, 4 months into the year, they actually burned through the entire fucking budget. Now, it's not just Uber that actually has this issue too, ladies and gentlemen. Even companies like Microsoft. Yes, the same company that has been pushing so much AI slop to the rest of the world also says that using this technology is actually more expensive than paying real fucking human people their salaries. Why? Because the prices have just gone through the roof. And they have been going through the roof basically for the last few months. Things have been spiking. So basically, a lot of their guys who write code use things like Anthropic's Claude Code, for instance. Now, this is summarized because this is a paywall sort of report. But basically, the same tool that I'm using, instead of connecting it to the local system that I have, I'm only using their tool connected to a local engine anyways. But again, they've been moving people away from, again, the Claude guys over to their own GitHub guys. And even though Claude was only open 6 months ago, thousands of their developers, designers, middle management, everyone, were basically moved over because ultimately at the end of the fucking day, it is actually too expensive for them to be using the real nice premium frontier stuff. And that's Microsoft as a company fucking saying it. And you gotta take my word for it, like literally from the actual horse's mouth, the man behind the AI slop at Microsoft, he's pretty much said they pay a lot of money to companies like Anthropic, and ultimately it's their goal to eliminate that cost. It's so much to the point that obviously at the end of the day, Microsoft has invested and built even models like MI, for instance, multiple different models that, the entire goal of this is not just to reach what we already have, but to make it substantially affordable, right? To lower the cost, to make it efficient. Because ultimately, if the biggest companies in the world are kind of calling this stuff out, if the people that are behind the data centers, the people that are behind the tech are saying that it's incredibly expensive and that ultimately at the end of the day, if these things don't go down, it's going to be a bad situation for the technology as a whole going forward. I mean, It's one thing to have a world riddled with artificial intelligence and all these systems. It's another thing to, sort of convince the rest of the masses that this is a smart place to put your money into and not just an entire burn pit. You see, where the real problem with a lot of this AI slop is that when a lot of these companies move their people over, they actually end up losing a lot of money. Not because the AI is necessarily terrible, it's because they're dealing with hallucinations, they're dealing with the actual hidden cost that none of the fucking salesmen have told them about, right? Things like compliance issues. The fact that ultimately the end, no matter how much slop you slop out, you still need a human being to read that slop. As this actual tool is building this fucking game, 6,500 tokens, by the way, I still, as a human, need to read the lines of code to see if there aren't any mistakes, if there aren't any glaring security issues, if things actually function. Because for somebody that doesn't know programming, this might actually build a platforming game that you think is great. It's fine. It's whoop-de-doodles. But it's probably broken in many ways. And unless you know the code you're looking at, you won't really know how to fucking fix it or even prompt the AI to fix it itself. And here's the thing about this too, right? Like if you look at the prices for any of these models, for instance, if you go to like Claude, you can actually see that their prices are kind of as we've seen right over here. So they've given you their prices based on input tokens, cache writes, cache hits, output tokens, yada, yada, yada. Now, this is by far one of the most like expensive AIs to kind of play around with. Because again, if you're looking at things like their most, top tier models, you're looking at something like $25 per million tokens. And of course, a lot of other companies and countries have kind of come in trying to undercut severely what that American market is. So for instance, DeepSeek, a name that you probably know all too well if you've been following my channel. DeepSeek as a company has basically provided access to their artificial intelligence for, I'm not joking with you, pennies compared to, again, their big American counterparts. Now, is this AI as good as whatever the fuck the Americans have? Probably not. Like, to be honest with you, probably not. But it's also given at such a cheap cost that even if you're somebody that's like, you know what, instead of paying like, $15 for these million token outputs, I might as well just consider paying like $1, maybe a few pennies in certain cases, and call it a day. That's just where the situation is at this moment in time. So as we've been yapping this whole time, you can see that 1,300 lines of code have been slopped out. And of course, I'm going to let the actual AI do this, right? I'm going to let it just keep continuing because it has a goal to hit, and it's 10 minutes into that goal so far. Now, a lot of these AI companies like Anthropic, like ChatGPT or OpenAI have kind of been moving towards what they call the IPO, which is the initial public offering. Now, in my understanding, right, like a business, right, like let's say you're like a small business, it's not about just like making money hand over fist. Sometimes if you have like 10 employees, if you have like, your needs, as long as you're meeting your needs and you still can make some money on top and have it set aside to reinvest on yourself, or for a rainy day fund is kind of a great situation to be in, right? It's a better situation than I think most people are really in. But when it comes to these AI companies, they're not really businesses so much as money burners, right? So let's say that they're worth like $1 trillion, but then like the investors that are coming into this IPO, they're going to be like, wait a minute, you guys aren't actually making a lot of money. You guys spend a lot more money than you actually fucking make. And so in crypto terms, I think this is what we kind of call like a weird rug pull, where I think a lot of these companies, when the initial investors pull their money out and the new guys who put their money in, the exit liquidity, as some would call it, that's going to be a scary sign, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I really feel like when these companies IPO, that's when this bubble is going to be much more apparent to the average person, right? When the actual investor kind of sees into it and realizes, whoa, the money isn't all there. It's kind of similar to like the earlier YouTuber MCN networks where like, a lot of these big companies like Disney, for instance, bought out like, studios like Maker, like these multi-channel networks on YouTube. And they were like, whoa, because they make a lot of money. But then when they actually bought the service and they opened up their packages, they were like, wait a minute, yeah, they make a lot of money through YouTube AdSense because ultimately all our money routed through them anyways, but then they would take that money and basically just give it to the YouTuber anyways. So really they weren't actually making a lot of money anyways. And I think when people realize that when it comes to these AI bros, they're not really great at making money. In fact, if anything, unless you're willing to just keep throwing money into the burn pit, this is not so much a viable business. Now, the other reality of this too is that there's been another development, right? And the reason why I brought up the IPO is that Anthropic released this report today and said when the AI builds itself. So we're basically reaching what we call recursive self-improvement. And what that effectively means is instead of having humans build these tools, the AI is smart and strong enough to now just replicate itself. That, I guess, is where the future is sort of headed to. Now, ultimately, this is a super long reveal, but they kind of do showcase exactly how this stuff started, right? In the early days, a human being put together a tool called Claude. That tool was a chatbot that most of us have probably interacted with. Then that chatbot was used to create what we call an agent, which is exactly what I've been using to slop out this game so far, and it actually did succeed. It did finish its goal. That agent now creates workers, which are sub-agents, so smaller agents that work together to do individual tasks that a master agent sort of looks at. So basically, after all that, once an AI has closed the loop, meaning that the human is gone, can it just prompt itself to improve over time? That's kind of what Anthropic has sort of said. And I feel like a lot of this sort of hype comes out whenever they need to bolster their IPO a little bit, hey, we're about to go public. Look at us. We've got the scariest AIs ever made, the most powerful tools ever made. Hey, our shit can just fucking code itself. Imagine a business where we don't even need to hire other programmers. It'll just do it itself. It'll just get better. It's like sci-fi, bitch. That's what we're kind of looking at over here. So ultimately, I do like these posts from Anthropic because while it is self-fellatio, ultimately at the end of the day, they do genuinely talk about the kind of stuff that they've done. So over the course of just 2025, the amount of code that has been slopped out just at their company is basically 8 times what it used to be before 2025 as they released that Mythos shit. So what's interesting about this is Claude is getting better at proposing their own experiments. So this is actually kind of an interesting aspect, right? Basically, the AI is able to write its own experiments and then actually perform those own experiments as composed to compared to what a human being used to do, a fair bit ago. 2 human researchers over about a week recovered roughly 23% of that gap. The agents recovered 97% over 800 cumulative hours, and also used $18,000 in fucking compute. Yes, that is their own money that they're fucking spending to do this level of AI slop. AI slop is not like a cheap, it's not a cheap thing. It's an expensive endeavor to go down. 18 grand. So even the company behind AI slop has basically said, if it were possible to effectively slow the development of this technology, to give ourselves more time to deal with its immense implications, we think that would likely be a good thing. But if a slowdown simply lets the least cautious actors catch up, it would leave everyone less safe. And see, this is where the scary part of this whole situation comes out to, because the way that they talk about their artificial intelligences is actually quite fucking scary. For instance, they do compare their tools to something like missiles and nuclear weapons, right? Now, it's actually really interesting. If you look at the history of countries building their own nuclear weapons, I think it's like Pakistan and India, for instance, which are 2 of the countries that kind of surprised the rest of the world with hey, we also have nuclear weapons. A lot of those guys actually developed their stuff, I believe, in certain cases by smuggling the parts associated with actually building nuclear enrichment facilities. And it's because of that obviously they were I think both of them actually got reprimanded, sanctioned. You'd have to research this more, but it's an interesting topic of study. Building nuclear weapons is difficult because the ability to build nuclear weapons is so tightly monitored by the rest of the world that even if countries started to source parts for enrichment, it would draw the ire of the entire fucking world on you. But according to companies like Anthropic, remember, this is not actually concealing missile silos. This is just running software. And you can run software in any part of the world. Training AI is going to be far easier to conceal than missile silos. Their inputs are general purpose, and the incentive to defect quietly is enormous, because whoever continues while others pause could inherit the lead. Basically, what they're kind of saying over here is that, look, at the end, if they stop chasing the AI dragon, it's only going to let other countries, basically China at this point, take over the race right there. And ultimately, the end of the day, when we go back to the prices that, DeepSeek was putting, that undercutting isn't happening because China's an altruistic country. They really care about undermining America a lot, right? Like for them, if they can move most of the world to use Chinese models, that is a net positive. That means they're the ones that are making money, and maybe down the road those prices will get jacked when the American AI bubble pops because ultimately people are funneling their money over to another country. This bubble is only possible because these people are able to get billions of people to use their AI models. Even if you ever just interacted, you count as a number. And that number is used to show a lot of these investors that the demand exists. But these investors don't really understand, I think, how expensive this technology actually has gotten. And it's only going to get more expensive because it's just not efficient. And because it's not efficient, that is where the real actual pop sort of comes. That's why I'm telling you the bubble pop is a thing, and it's not just something that, I'm sort of like screaming into the heavens. I actually have the ability to explain why this is an unsustainable business and how this business will pop in the future if it's working in the same way that it is. So to go back and sort of tie this video off with, look, how much money did I actually spend on building a vibe-coded, like fucking Super Mario Brothers clone? According to this AI, 54 cents. And apparently I used tens of thousands of input tokens and about almost 19,000 output. So again, 54 cents, ultimately all of it running on my local system. And how does the actual game run? Well, here you go. So again, this is the actual clone that it made. And of course, as you can see, this is, wow, I fucking suck at this game. But you can see that it put together the first level of Mario. And is it really that impressive? I don't fucking know. It feels very floaty. But yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, without any human intervention, it put together and actually built the assets for a Mario clone. Now, is it impressive? Honestly, for something that was made in 10 minutes without a human being saying anything, not that bad, but you can clearly see the issues. The enemies are all the same, it screwed up the turtles, and ultimately, at the end of the day, the art style resembles more of like South Park than anything. But yeah, it built 3 levels. Am I going to play through all these 3 levels? Fuck no, I'll actually just play Super Mario Brothers. The fact that it launched me to the beginning without even resetting the enemy placements or any of these collectibles is hilarious. The fact that the ladder works already blows me away. You see, this is what happens when a human being doesn't make the fucking game. You can't finish it. You can't finish the game. It's funny, you could probably just figure out how the fuck it generated these levels in the first place and just change the values and fix it yourself. Or I guess how most modern programmers will do it is it's like, can't finish the first level, fix it for me, make no mistakes. That is the future of, I guess, any form of development here. But yeah, look, man, it's getting too expensive. The bubble is actually fucking close to popping at this point. Honestly, it's not so much like a dramatic pop as it is like the expensive world that we live in where this specific technology has sort of been what everyone is invested into. This is a technology that I don't see really going anywhere. I don't really see blowing up the way that it is. And I think the financial reckoning that we have is going to be a fucking interesting world to see. But ladies and gentlemen, I don't know. Maybe I'm screaming to the heavens like a fucking idiot, but hopefully you learned something about this technology in the video. Hopefully you learned how this stuff works. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.